imagine you're a rapper. You've got millions of streams, you've got fans, you've got a record deal, and you've been to federal prison, and somehow miraculously you get out, and now you're placed on home confinement, which means that you likely are being watched, monitored. You probably got an ankle GPS monitor attached to you. And then you decide to have this idea where you're gonna go to Dallas to hold someone at gunpoint to sign a contract. And then now you're facing federal kidnapping charges again. By now, you've all heard about what happened between Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Attorney Chameleon, and I started this YouTube channel to talk to people about the very thing that is lurking in the background of all of our lives, which is the law. Let's start here. Now, the Pooh Shiesty Gucci Mane issue is something we could all take a lesson from. And just a little bit of background for those who don't know, Pooh Shiesty's real name is Lantrell Williams Jr. And he made this song back in 2021, Back in Blood, which really took off and people loved him. He did it with Lil Durk, who also has his own problems right now. But in 2021, he caught a federal gun charge. He was placed in federal prison and then he was released. But on his release, he was given an ankle monitor. Now, as you can imagine, an ankle monitor has GPS capabilities. So what happened? Allegedly, on January 10th, Pooh Shiesty and a group of individuals, about 8 to 9 people, went down to Dallas from Memphis and to have this meeting with Gucci Mane and members of Gucci Mane's record label. And essentially what happened, right, according to the federal complaint, is that Pooh Shiesty held him at gunpoint and to make him sign an agreement that would release him from the music label, right? It's called a general release. And this happens all the time. Well, not the way that the complaint is saying, but usually this happens, right? This kind of dispute between an artist and the label, right? An artist signs a deal, later on they realize that the deal was and now they want to get out of the deal. And that's what's happening here in this case, right? Like, this artist is upset about the terms of his agreement and now he wants out. Now, I'm going to put my attorney hat on for a second because I want you to understand the difference between federal court and state court. Now, at federal court, federal prosecutors, they have way more resources than a state prosecutor could. Plus, they have more money to do things that they want to do. Not only that, in federal court, the conviction rate is much higher. I think we're talking about 90%. So chances are you're likely going to get convicted because the odds are stacked against you at that point. Now, here's the thing. He's being faced with a kidnapping charge, federal kidnapping charge, and that alone is going to carry up to life in prison. So that's something that we really want to consider. I think the minimum is 20 years to life in prison. So it's not 5, not 10. He's looking at a serious thing right here. Now, here's what I want you to take away from the things that I'm going to say in this video. Sometimes in life, as we're all going through our own journeys, right, we have to learn from the consequences of our past actions. This does not seem like a situation where someone has learned from their past actions. And I want to know your thoughts about that in the end of the video. Now, the complaint alleges some serious allegations. They're saying that Pooh Shiesty had an AK-47 and held Gucci Mane at gunpoint. And I want that to sink in just for a little bit because I want you to understand something. This is a situation that was handled, not through attorneys, not at the negotiation table, but through the threat of violence or force, right? And also there was one victim who was, I believe, choked to the point where they're unconscious. And I think it was also mentioned that Big 30, who happens to be another Memphis rapper, well known, had stolen some, allegedly, of course, had stolen some Rolexes and other kind of valuables. And I want you to understand that this is a sad situation, right? But there's something that we could all learn from this. And it's more so that this wasn't an accident. This was a decision, right? This was a gap in thinking. And I talk about making decisions in one of my recent YouTube videos, which you can watch here. And I talk about this because I want us to begin thinking about the decisions that we make in life, because obviously there are all consequences, and you know this. You're old enough to know that there are consequences to your decisions. But I think sometimes we don't fully think these things through, and I think these young men didn't do that. Now, I want to walk you through some of the evidence that is likely going to be used against them. The FBI, they didn't really have to do that much of a hard job, and no disrespect to the agents out there, especially if you're watching in the enforcement agency or industry or whatever. But Pooh Shiesty had an ankle monitor on, right? Guys, you're on home confinement with an ankle monitor that has GPS tracking on it. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that you would commit a crime that would have this ankle monitor attached to you, and then now it's following you all over while you're doing your dirt. It just doesn't make any sense. And then you've got, license plate readers and cell phone records, which are likely going to place you near that studio where the incident took place. And that's why I say sometimes, we really got to think through our decisions, because we have to understand the kinds of consequences that are out there. And this is some of them. Another thing to bring up is surveillance footage. I mean, look, these guys, they allegedly, they went to a hotel after the incident was done. Cameras, that's going to place you near the scene or around the time frame of when it happened. All these things are capturing, the things that we're doing. And we got to understand something. Look, we don't live in a stone age anymore. We live in a digital age. We live where there's tons of cameras out there. You're constantly being recorded. So it just doesn't make much sense to me that you would commit a crime in 2026 knowing all the things that could be used against you, such as this. In addition to what I said before, this is kind of what's mind-blowing to me is this rental car. And the rental car was allegedly rented by Latrell Williams Sr. And I'm saying senior because it happens to be the father of Pooh Shiesty. And I want that to sink in a little bit because I want you to think about something. This is, imagine committing a crime with your father. Is this the world we live in? And committing a crime with your father, if this is said to be true, it's very unfortunate because I think this is an issue that goes deeper than just what we're seeing on the surface. But that's not what this video is about. Aside from the rental car, which is going to show that you've rented a car at a certain time and this was used, fingerprints, guys, there's fingerprints at the scene all over the studio. These guys didn't have gloves. I doubt Gucci Mane was sitting down, at the studio and everyone had gloves on their hands. Imagine all the things that was probably touched. Probably, Shiesty's fingerprints are located there. It's not looking good. In my opinion, it's not. Now, perhaps the most mind-boggling thing to me is social media. I talk about this all the time, how social media can help or hurt you. And in this case, I think social media is hurting these guys because after the event, right, the alleged incident that took place, after this alleged incident, it's allegedly said that these people took photos of themselves boasting the crime, wearing the Rolexes, the valuables, and the jewelry. It's like, guys, I say this all the time, like you can't do something and then be mad at the consequences, especially when you're displaying to the world what you did and be mad at how people are reacting to it. You're committing a crime and then you're showcasing it. You're showcasing what you did. And in a sense, that would be snitching, right? And I think snitching is one of those things that is not, appreciated or supported in the industry. So it's like, why would you go and do something like that? I can never understand why people do a crime and then go boast about it online. And that talks to me about something that I've been thinking about for a while. It's just more so the decision-making process that goes on. It doesn't make much sense to me. So here's what I really want to talk about, and this is what this channel is about. We could all learn a lesson from this, and it's unfortunate that, I'm making a video on someone's misery, but this is a situation we could all learn from. When you have a situation where you've been in a consequence, right? And the consequence that I'm referring to is Pooh Shiesty's been in federal prison before, right? So you know what it's like to lose your freedom. So why would you put yourself in a situation to do that again? And that's where I'm having a hard time. Now, there could be an argument that could be said, well, Gucci Mane may have owed him money. I think there was a rumor that said that Gucci Mane owed Pooh Shiesty about $25 million. But let me ask you this. Is that worth having the potential consequence of you spending your life in prison for the rest of your life? You tell me. I really don't know. I just don't think it makes sense. But it also doesn't make sense that if the whole goal here was to get out of your contract, right? You got to understand, one of the defenses to a contract, right? Like if someone was to sign a contract that, they're trying to get out of it, is signing a contract under duress, threat of force. That's one way to get a contract, thrown out. Because at the end of the day, a contract is an agreement between two people, right? And if I'm signing a contract under force, I'm not in agreement with you. I'm doing this because you're forcing me to do it. So in a way, I think Pooh Shiesty's ultimate goal was to get out of contract, but that was never accomplished. And probably what really sucks here is the fact that even after pulling this stunt, even though his music probably blown up even more and he made more streams and his music probably made more money, that money probably goes back to Gucci Mane. So at the end of the day, I don't think this was really a smart decision of Pooh Shiesty. And I think the way to have gone about it would have been through the negotiating table, hiring an attorney, or leveraging your social media platform, right? It's not like Pooh Shiesty is not known. He has a following. He probably could have used his following to get the outcome that he really wanted, And the reason why I bring this up is that sometimes there are other alternative avenues that will help you get to the goal that you want to. And the same thing applies in your life, right? Some of you out there may be watching and maybe you're going through issues with your job, right? Maybe you got a crappy manager and you're thinking about hitting in the face. Maybe you're going through a financial hit, right? Or maybe you are having issues with your spouse. Maybe some domestic things are going on. I really don't know, but I want you to really think about your actions and your decisions, because you're going to understand that your decisions have consequences, right? You're not just going to, slap your manager in the face because of something that they said and that you don't agree with or you don't like, right? And maybe you would, and hey, you do what you want, but I want you to really think about the consequence of that, and is it worth it, right? Because let's say that you do slap your manager in the face and then you lose your job and now you have financial issues, right? It's like we have to think about how all of these things play out with each other. We have to think of the pros and cons, and we got to weigh them. We really got to weigh them, and I don't think that was really done here in this situation, right? I want to know what led to this situation, right? And from what we know right now at this time, is that it's a contract dispute, right? It's a dispute between an artist and a label. We've seen disputes like this all the time, not in the fashion that we're here talking about, but we've seen this dispute many times and over again. I think you tried to pull Suge Knight or so, but we've seen this dispute, right? It's where you enter into a contract, right, early on, and then you want to get out because you don't like the terms anymore. They're no longer good, right? And the way to handle that matter is through a civil system, which is created already, right? You'd go to court, you'd hire a fancy lawyer. A fancy lawyer would go argue why you should be released out of this contract, or argue with the other side to release you, or else to take this thing further and to escalate it. Your fancy lawyer would help you strategize in terms of how to solve this problem, because not everything is just about going the legal route. There's other ways to solve things, right? And I think there was a lapse of judgment here. Thoughts weren't fully developed, and it's just an unfortunate situation. And I'll keep track on this one. It seems to be something that is of interest to most people, but I think at the end of the day, I want us to learn a lesson from this and to apply it into our own lives. Right? We just witnessed someone who was in jail, federal prison, who got out of federal prison on home confinement, put himself back in, federal prison. And I want you to think about the situations in your life where you've been placed in something tragic, got out of it, and then ask yourself, do I go back to that, or do I move on from that? You let me know. How would you have handled the situation? What would you have done differently? What would have been another alternative that Pooh Shiesty should have considered if he did these things?